Our years of marriage were amazing. I mean, we had great kids, and we were each other's best friends, and he was everything I ever wanted. You know, I think we were just so busy being married and having kids that the little things that I was noticing in our marriage that weren't right, I didn't know why, and didn't even know how to deal with them. But then I discovered the porn addiction and through a journal, and that was really the first time that I knew.
You know, when I became a Christian, you know, I was into playing roles, and you know, so I jumped right into that, you know, that playing the good Christian role. So you know, I taught senior high Sunday school, adult Bible studies. I was on church committees, and all the while, so certainly I still had this secret life, and you know, I was losing faith in God, and so it just. But you know, you have that. You know, that's where my identity was kind of tied up in that, being that good Christian, and so it just. You know, at some point you reach that point where you don't want to break everybody's expectations, or you know what they're thinking about me, and so you know, fast forward, I guess you know, about 8 years after I had accepted Christ, I started working in West Africa on a 28 day rotation. So home 28 days, away 28 days.
It was really hard because we just moved to Houston, so we hadn't established any connections like we had where we were. And so all the people that friends I was meeting and making, he didn't know. So it was like we had two different lives going on, for one thing. But it was a roller coaster.
And then, you know, when I first went to, you know, Africa, I was, you know, I had, you know, some position, right? I had authority and influence, but the rotational, they were getting away from the rotational model. So I was losing authority and influence at work. So that value I got from my work role was also being taken away. You know, I was losing my faith. So all those, I guess, foundational pillars that I was drawing value from were just, you know, I don't want to say God was taking away, but you know, they were all just kind of crumbling. That's when I met a woman there in Africa. She was rotating as well, and you know, I established a connection with her, and you know, mostly because I think she told me the things that I wanted to hear, you know, to kind of build me back up.
And that's when I noticed a huge change in him. He would come home and be totally disconnected to our family. When he came home on Christmas, he barely spoke to anybody. I mean, he was very angry, always impatient, which was so out of character for him. He was usually so loving, and you know, so that scared me because I was like, this is not even the man I know. And I said, why don't you write me a letter? You're really great at your feelings on paper, so why don't you just tell me how you feel? He actually read me the letter, but in about the first paragraph it says, I don't love you anymore. And so all of a sudden I didn't hear the rest of the letter. And I kept telling him, that's impossible. Like, you love me so much. Like, what are you saying? And so I was kind of in shock all day. And so later I said, honey, I need to read that letter. Like, can I just read it? Can you give me your laptop and just let me read it and let me digest it? So I went off in a room by myself, and I'm halfway through, and the Lord said, go to his email. So I clicked it, and there it was. I was so heartbroken. I mean, I thought about driving my car into a tree just for a second. I mean, like, I was in such pain. I can't even describe it. You know, I'm sure a lot of people hearing this story, women, understand that, but I just couldn't believe it, and I felt so abandoned and rejected, and you know, how could this be?
It's hard to describe, right? I just was embarrassed, and you know, I felt bad for her, but I think I felt more bad probably for me, you know, the way it is. You know, you just, that moment of revelation where something's exposed that you're trying to keep secret, it was hard.
I just spent that whole month praying and learning about forgiveness, because I knew, you know, God told me to forgive him, and I thought, you know, what, right now, you know, but yes, right now, that's for me. That forgiveness is for me. That kept that anger and resentment and bitterness from building up and hurting me. I realized that, you know, it wasn't for him. I wasn't condoning. I wasn't even wanting to reconcile, and none of that. But I had to keep forgiving daily and surrendering my husband and our marriage to him, because he was the only one that could heal me and heal him.
You know, I didn't want the marriage to work, to be honest. You know, I thought it would be better somewhere else, starting over. And so, you know, I pushed her away. You know, I manipulated counselors, or tried to, you know, because I wanted them to tell us, well, there's no hope for you guys. You just need to split, and then I could walk away guilt-free. But that didn't happen, and she didn't give up on me. God kept asking me, what'll be different next time? So let's say you go off with this other woman, what's going to be different? When things get rough, how's it going to be different? And I kept trying to convince God and myself that, it certainly will be different, because I'll just make it different. And I said, well, if I can make it different with her, why can't I make it different with Leanne? And I think also seeing her faith and her steadfast commitment to the marriage, because she said she wasn't going to say goodbye.
God said, you're going to help people just like you. Don't, I'll work it out. And so we totally put it in God's hands, and we said, okay, help us find a ministry. You got to bring the people. I don't believe in forcing things. I'm like, if this is from you, Lord, you're going to open every door, right? So we looked at several ministries that were good, and then we saw an ad on a magazine for Conquer, and so we thought, let's try this. So we ordered it, watched it, loved it, and so we knew it was going to help so many people. Just watching it, those helped us. And just it was beautiful. And so we that's how we started groups. We reviewed all that, and we started in our home, and it was such a blessing to see how God worked through all these people, and it just gave us an even bigger desire to want to continue that, and just to bring hope and healing and also salvation to people. I had been praying for God to give this man godly sorrow, and just to, help him to be transformed. And God told me that I would know he was different, that I could trust him when he asked me for forgiveness, and he gave me a vision of Mike on his knees, and that happened. 2.5 years after God told me, I'm like, God, I don't see that ever happening. And he got on his knees with such humility and such godly sorrow and such tenderness. And he took me on a marriage retreat so I could heal, because I didn't speak of my pain for 3.5 years, really. And so that whole weekend, he just listened to me tell him all the ways he hurt me. And and he took it. And he's always been so great about answering my questions. And anyway, he's a different person now, and we connect so differently even than before this all happened, and it's completely changed our marriage.
The real vision would be for churches to be a place where people could be open and vulnerable. That was hard as a Christian, sitting in a church full of perfect people, knowing that I wasn't, because everybody around me, nobody shows any vulnerability. And so just to be able to to share our story as much as possible, so people know it's okay to not be okay, right? Putting yourself out there and getting honest with yourself and your wife or somebody else will seem like the hardest thing you'll ever do. Everything you want in life is on the other side of fear. And it's true. It's hard to put yourself out there, but once you do it, you find out how easy it was, and then how good it can be, how much relief there is in doing that. I always want to say thank you, to that person, somebody who wanted to give, 7 years ago to this ministry, and it paid for an ad on the back of a magazine, and we founded that little seed, grew into 30 groups of men and women. Just the way God was able to use that act of faith, and so we want to be able to kind of pay that back, and so that's why we sow into this ministry, because we believe in it, and we want to reap where we sow.
I want to invite you to think about a number with me: 39,489,030. Based on what we know, 38% of Americans say they attend church regularly, and yet just 7% of churches say they have an active approach or ministry to help men and women who are struggling with unwanted sexual behavior. That means that 39,489,030 people lack access to hope, healing, and freedom from unwanted sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. As you've heard in this story, when someone is granted access, Christ can do amazing things in their story. So we want to invite you to join with us and be part of the effort to grant access to people everywhere who are desperately looking for hope and healing. Thank you for joining us in this effort.